On the line right now is Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi. Talks seemed to break down in the Senate yesterday. What's going on, and what does this mean? Anthony, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
Well, we seem to be doing this every day. It's like Groundhog Day here. So,
it's like a bad dream.
Yeah. So that's it, right? We're nothing until what, April 24th at the earliest.
It appears that way. The Assembly is going to go back into session today. The impression was that we would continue working till a budget happened, but that looks like that's not the case now, and folks are going to go on recess, and I guess we'll deal with this when we come back from Easter vacation. So, yeah. But the problem we have is that schools are just going to be making their budgets towards the end of April and have to have them adopted by mid-May, so they're going to be going off of what the governor's education numbers are. That's far too low for many of our school districts, especially Utica, which is projecting about $1.5 million deficit. The larger problem that we have now is that there's this charter school tuition freeze, which has been in place for the last 5 years, I think it is. So basically what that means is, the local schools that have charters in them, so for example, Utica, pay a certain amount for each student that goes to the charter school. Right. And that number has been frozen for the last 5 years. That freeze ends in June, which means that the amount of money Utica and other school districts that have charters in them will increase in June for next year.
Got it.
Which is an additional almost $500,000 hit.
And that comes right out of that comes right out of Utica's budget, right?
Comes directly out of Utica's budget.
Yeah.
And if that freeze isn't continued, or if the state doesn't step in and pick up the share, then it's going to really hurt a lot of school districts. You look at bigger areas, New York City, it's like a $200 million cost because they have so many charters down in New York City. Other cities, Albany, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, same situation. So it's dire. Now,
NYSED out last night blaming Senate Republicans, and when we chatted last night, you say it's not necessarily the case.
I think there's a lot of blame to go around. I think this charter school, at the last minute, I think the reason talks really broke down is there was a proposal on the table to increase the amount of funding that the state gives to charter schools. And many of us sat there and said, okay, we're going to be increasing the foundation aid, which is the money that goes to all of our schools, but is particularly helpful to the schools in this area. We're really going to give them, let's say, $90 million increase for 92% of the students in the state, and you want to give charter schools something like a $72 million increase for 8% of the students across the state. Doesn't make sense. That money should be going into the foundation aid, not the charter school funding. Yeah. But that's kind of where talks broke down at that point, and it seemed like after the deadline passed, more and more things got added into this agreement that really made the whole thing impossible to do.
And we're, the talk has been how the governor's really been able to push policy in through this budget, and policy that is going to allow for a big splash, whether it's the quote unquote free tuition or some of the other issues that he's really pushing. Raise the age is a big one, as well. How does the governor end up looking, though? It almost seems like he has nothing to lose here, because he knows at the end of the day he's going to get what he wants, and people could end up really looking negatively on legislators for not getting this done.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of blame to go around on all sides at this point. There's no reason why we couldn't have had a budget done, in my opinion, by the deadline. But because of some of the policy that was in there, specifically raised the age, which was very problematic for the Senate Republicans. Yeah. The free college tuition, which was concerning on all sides. Debates over education and charter school funding, which is charter school funding is something that the Assembly is not in favor of, and certainly want parents to have choice in terms of where they send their kids to school, but don't think that underfunded schools like Utica should be footing the bill. So it was a difficult budget year on all sides, and I think it remains to be seen who's going to get blamed for all this. The issue is that these school districts are going to have an issue in the next couple of weeks as they start to form their budgets.
Yeah, it's going to, and boy, I hate to say, if it begins costing jobs, Utica's cut already. They've cut back so much, And we keep hearing stories that, there are more languages now in the Utica School District than last year. It continues to grow. More students. It's the one district that continues to grow.
Right. It is. And, if you're looking at $1 million, $2 million deficit, that's going to mean cuts in teachers and cuts in staff and possible programming cuts. So it's not good.
All right. Interesting. Anthony, thanks so much for taking the time this morning. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Bill.
Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi. Let's go to the other side of the aisle. Assemblyman Marc Butler is on the line right now. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bill.
I thought this was all done yesterday. It looked like the deal was done. Joy and happiness.
We kept getting tweets and chatter on the internet that, yes, the agreement had been breached. We just needed to wait for the bills to be printed up, and we began yesterday with real optimism, but that kind of faded away in a hurry. I have to go back, and I harped on it the other day when I spoke to you, but this raise the age issue ought not to be tied in with the budget. I think that's a major sticking point, and I think this is a way to get a controversial piece of legislation passed without, the full legislative review. I don't agree with it at all, and we're kind of keeping an eye on what the governor's doing. He tries to slip things into his budget that are policy issues and not monies and cents issues, dollars and cents issues.
And really with just kind of pointing the finger at the legislature. See, they can't get it done. They just can't get it done, right? I mean, that's how the governor's looking at this.
Well, look, I said it before. I think the relationship between the governor and the legislature has changed dramatically over the last several months. We used to rush and try and get things done so we could meet that April 1st deadline. But this year, I don't see that kind of cooperation anymore. I think that's gone. So it's a new relationship, and I think we're kind of feeling our way along. But I think the governor, number one, the 6-week extender, that's pretty much unprecedented. Before if we went late, there'd be a two-week extender. At least express some optimism that we could resolve it. He's just throwing his hands up and say, "Go on home," and it can't get done. And I don't agree with that either.
Listen, I know that you have a very close contact with someone in education and your wife. And this is tough on schools. This is going to be a real problem.
It is certainly going to be a real problem. I don't know how they're going to resolve it. The traditional thought is always to go with the numbers the governor first put out, which are dramatically lower than the numbers we've been talking about. I think $1.2 billion from one of the houses, and I think the Assembly Democrats have proposed $1.8 billion. So there's a lot of difference between those numbers. It's going to be a nightmare for these schools trying to put a budget together and get people to vote up on them.
All right, Assemblyman Marc Butler, we appreciate you keeping us up to speed here on all this. It is crazy. Everybody was in celebration mode, and now we're heading home. Crazy.
That's it.
All right, Assemblyman.
Take care, Bill.
Thanks, Marc Butler. We appreciate it.